did you think you were when you first became aware of the concept of money? Was it when you first got pocket money? Or maybe it was when someone explained the concept of the tooth fairy to you. Believe it or not, these memories are surprisingly important. A person's views around money are formed when they're just 7 years old. We call these money stories. What do they mean and why do they matter? That's today on Money and a Good Life. Do you have views and beliefs about money which are affecting your life today that you're not even aware of? Well, that's what we're getting to the bottom of in this episode. I'm Stephanie Coombs. Ryan Watson is my co-host and a money expert. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Steph.
And to help with this meaty subject, we've got money coach and mindset mentor Suzanne Alexander with us. Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, great to be here.
Okay, now to start off, can you guys remember your first money memory? Ryan, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I can. I put a bit of thought into this. I reckon I was about 6 years old. I grew up in Geelong and I was at a fete, Heighton Primary School, and I ran out of money. So it's quite interesting. It brought back some anxious feelings and things like that. I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, when I think my earliest story or thoughts around money.
What were you spending all your money on?
I would have been lollies. I reckon there was a jumping castle as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Tried to make it go far, but I did remember there was worry and concern.
Running out of money at a fete is very relatable.
Exactly right.
Royal Easter Show, when you've got a finite amount and you've got all those show bags to get. That's
exactly. Yeah, priorities, right?
Very
priorities.
What about you, Suzanne? Do you remember yours?
I was thinking about it as well. And if I go back in time, it was definitely the tooth fairy. You know, you put a tooth in a glass of water and then the next morning there'd be a 20-cent piece. Now, I'm sure that has changed.
Inflation?
It might be a gold coin now rather than a silver one. But that was my first recollection of money.
It's a really weird thing to teach your kids, isn't it? That if you sell your teeth, you get a reasonable return. I don't really know what the lesson is there. And I was thinking about the tooth fairy as well. Like, where did that come from and why do we do that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting in 2024 as well about how much the tooth fairy gives out. I've heard as much as $20.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like it's a human tooth. You know,
True.
how much would you give up one of your teeth for?
Yeah.
You know?
Probably slightly more than 20.
Well, there we go. If anything, the tooth fairy hasn't really gone up in terms of the demand and the need. Anyway, so how we're raised can obviously affect our views with money. But what are some of the other factors, Suzanne?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about it, cultural influences will impact religion, environmental, but also societal. So societal expectations with regard to, you know, what you should do, how you should earn money, what you should spend your money on, and essentially what sort of housing structure, where within the demographic of the city or the location that you are, where you should live. All of that will impact our decisions we have with money and the beliefs and thoughts we have with money.
So, Suzanne, you work as a money coach. Mm-hmm. What are some of the common negative attitudes to money that you come across?
Yeah, look, it's a great question because a lot of what I see is quite often fear, guilt, shame around money. And often this is driven by past events or experiences. And that could have been events and experiences that happened in childhood or potentially later in life, especially if there's, you know, someone's gone through a separation or they've lost someone of significance and, you know, that connotation of, well, you know, if I lose someone and money comes into the mix, you know, do I really want that money because I've had to lose someone? So it can come from different avenues with regard to how we interpretate the meaning that we actually give money. But essentially, they're the core ones that I see. And then they obviously impact the decisions and then the behaviours and habits and ultimately the results we have with money.
And just on that, Suzanne, so your journey to a money coach, but you started out as a financial advisor.
I did.
I'd be really interested to hear the journey and, you know, whether it was a calling.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, you know, it's funny, Ryan, you should say this because I do think that, you know, it has been a calling in terms of I've been in the finance industry for over 18 years. I was a financial advisor for 8. And the biggest gap that I identified was, and this is, you know, for me personally as well as my clients, between what you would, you know, explain and tell a client to do in terms of the statement of advice that is given and then what they will actually go off and do. And then when you caught up with them for their review, it's like, oh, where are you at and, how are you going? And it's like they've gone off and done all of this stuff that might have actually sabotaged their situation. And I know with my own relationship with money, so I grew up in an environment where it was very much a scarcity and lack mindset. You have to work super hard to earn money.
Mm-hmm.
And so whilst I was earning good money, I had all the practical tools with regard to how to make and manage money and multiply money. I still felt like underneath I was sabotaging myself. So this actually, I guess, invited me to start exploring, well, why was that the case? Why was it for me? Why was it for my clients? And that led me on this pathway to more of the psychology, the behavioural aspects of money. And it was in the early stages of COVID lockdown, there's got to be some benefits there, that I came across financial coaching and thought, oh, that was the gap. And then since then, I've just been going down this, rabbit warren of, psychology of money, the behavioural aspects, quantum physics, all of this, and how does our mind operate and how does it influence how we behave with money?
So if you do everything right, that's an interesting point, that you might have your finances completely in control and everything looks correct, but you still have this anxiety or this scarcity that you say.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to go a little bit deeper than that and make people feel better about their situation or understand maybe the decisions that they're making.
Absolutely. So if you think about it, and this will commonly present itself, and I was in a similar situation. I was a good saver, but I was really bad with spending on myself. So in actual fact, what I went into was literally I didn't feel worthy of spending on myself. It always had to be on others, or I had to save, because the fear was there was so much hard work in earning this money. That was the narrative I was telling myself. That was the belief. So why would I go and waste that money on trivial things? And so I really actually had an unhealthy relationship with money. And I see that with clients that I work with. They'll come in and they're like, I'm good savers, but just something doesn't feel right. I'm not making progress. And a lot of that time is they're sitting in a place of lack and scarcity, and it's like, I have to hold on to this money.
As opposed to, the alternative, maybe, Suzanne, being more about abundance?
Yeah, the alternative is the abundance, which is, we obviously want to come back into a neutral form with money, but essentially when you're in abundance, and that's where we want to lean more into, which is that there is more than enough money, that money will be there, but we can also be challenged when we just sit focusing on it'll work out. It can also result in a little bit of sabotaging behaviour, because we still need to take the action steps. But in terms of an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset, we don't want to lean more into the abundance mindset, which is all about, well, money can work for us. What actions do we need to be taking? Rather than maybe blaming others for our situation, it's coming back into, well, what can we step in? What responsibility can we step into?
I was going to say taking ultimate responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that can quite often when it's, you're coming from a place of it'll just work itself out, or someone will come in and rescue me, that's not taking responsibility. And then vice versa on the scarcity mindset, which is lack, you are taking so much responsibility, it's almost a controlling, which can sort of shut you down. So we sort of want to come back more into neutral, obviously, with more of an abundance mindset overview.
When you said that some of the more negative things that you come across are fear, guilt, shame, does that track with you as well, Ryan? Is that what you see a lot of?
Absolutely. We've talked about before about people's relationship money, that's how it's formed, and Suzanne touched on that earlier today. It's so much more about the mindset. We really like diving into the problem as opposed to just the symptoms. The challenge is when a client will come and see us and think that we can do the heavy lifting. Don't know that I love it, but we like the personal training analogy. So personal trainers there to coach, guide, build a plan. But at the end of the day, the client has to lift the weights or decide what they eat. So it's not dissimilar to a relationship with an advisor. We are all in. We know our role is to inspire, educate, and support our clients. At the end of the day, they've got to contribute as much as we do as well. So for us to play in that mindset space, help them understand where they want to go, understand what's really important to them, and then we'll help grow them as well.
And on the topic of understanding, it's probably not a bad thing to sort of unpick what sort of relationship you have with money and maybe where that comes from. So is this why it's good to be aware of your money story? Because once you know about it, you can change it.
Yeah, absolutely. So understanding your money story, your money blueprint is the first key component. It's awareness. So the more that you're aware of where you're operating from, the more that you can honour those things that are supportive and helping you to make progress in the direction you want to make progress, and the more you can start calling out those things that are maybe more sabotaging and limiting you.
How do you become aware of it? Because I think that's part of the problem, right? We operate on a surface level. We don't necessarily investigate our own motivations or why we do things. What can we do to get down that further level and know what is driving our behaviours?
Yeah, great question. First off is asking yourself, like the question we started off today, what was your earliest memory? Even for Ryan, he's like, I was at the showground, I ran out of money, and really starting to be aware of the emotions that we're, evoking as part of that memory. If you think about it, we think in the form of pictures and symbols. So we see something, we take that in, and then what happens is we actually attach an emotional connection to that. So we evoke emotions and then those feelings form. And normally what happens is those emotions and feelings will leave our body within 90 seconds. But if that has actually impacted us more, and more often than not, in not a supportive way, we'll actually hold on to this emotional connection. And that's what stays in our body and then influences how we behave and act with money. And so that's why the more awareness we can bring, the more we can actually call out whether, we're acting in a way that's not supporting us, because obviously that then impacts the results that we achieve. So it's a cycle. So if we don't change the way we think, the way that we feel with regard to money, then we just keep the same pattern that gets the same results. It's like a circle that goes round and round.
And do you think it's fair to say, Suzanne, that most people don't have a conscious relationship with money or understand their own?
Yeah. One of the questions I love to ask is, if you were to treat money as a friend, what sort of friend is it? And they're like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, if money was to be a friend, how would you describe it? And that's going to really give you some awareness around your relationship with money, but it's also going to give you a level of unconscious awareness. So there's conscious awareness, which is sort of in the now, and we're consciously aware. And then the subconscious is like a filing cabinet that is full of all of these events, experiences, meanings that we've given it. And until we start to deepen that questioning, which builds the awareness, we don't really know that that's what our relationship is.
I imagine you've got some very interesting answers to that question as well, Suzanne. Is there one particular one that comes to mind? It's a very thought-provoking question.
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone has their own unique relationship with money, and it can range from fun and joyful and happy to evil. They're never there. I always have to follow them up. I feel
it's
like
a real persona, right?
Yeah, it is. And so that's why I think once we start looking at it through the lens of a friendship, and we start to acknowledge that money needs as much nurturing as any good friendship. If you're not checking in with friends, you're not catching up, you can tell, the friendship just sort of tends to ease away. Now, you always have friends that'll always be there maybe. You catch up with them, a couple of years and it'll be like it was yesterday. But money needs a little bit more nurturing or more purpose. It's like the leaky bucket. If you've got a hole in the bucket, it doesn't matter how much goes in, it's just going to come out through that hole. And the same with regard to your relationship with money. If you're not bringing more intentionality around how you want that relationship to be, how you want to build wealth in your life, then how can you actually nurture that in a way to support that vision?
Like any relationship, you've got to work on your relationship with money.
Yeah, spot on.
Whenever I get a bill in, right, it doesn't matter if it's like a bill for electricity or car repair work or whatever, I'll know it's coming. But whenever I get it, I get this pang of extreme anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I'll look at it, I'll be like, I'm going to deal with that one later, even though I know that it's coming, and even though I have the money to pay it. I've never not paid a bill, but I always get this clench. And it's funny because that is something that I've just sort of let wash over me, but I've never investigated why I feel that. And I imagine that there are people who also have these flashes of emotion when they're dealing with cash. That's probably not a bad place to start investigating.
Yeah. So to Do you mind if I unpack that a little bit?
Go ahead.
That's why we're here. Yeah. That's great.
So essentially there's two aspects there. So when we talk about the cash relationship as well, so when we operate with money, it's much more tangible. And so there's research into this that the pain factor of handing over cash versus tapping a card is so much greater than tapping a card because it's a delayed pain because we don't have to look at that card until later. So that's one component of it is, am I prepared to give the cash now, which is that pain association of, oh gosh, the bank balance is going down versus, oh, I'm just going to throw this on a credit card and I'm going to deal with it later. The other side of that is coming back to the personas, which is, I know it's coming, it's causing me a little bit of overwhelm, anxiousness, is that I'm just going to put my head in the sand and then I'm just going to deal with that later, which is a little bit of the innocent, which is it'll work itself out, But the other side of that is, when you receive that bill, just tapping in and just going, well, why do I feel anxiousness around getting this bill? And then asking just a deeper question, and what else? What else do I feel anxious or what is coming up for me? And I'd also invite you to explore what body sensations coming up. Because normally we hold on to an emotion that's driving this anxiousness that is linked to this attachment to a bill coming in.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I can already think about my shoulders sort of tensing up or something, but it's these things sort of wash over you so quickly. You feel it, and then it's gone, and then you move on. But that is clearly part of a larger tapestry of how I feel about money. And maybe if I sort of unpacked that, then, I try and sort of not think about money too much because I do find it a little bit overwhelming, a little bit stressful. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening who also have that feeling. But if I got over that, I know that I'd be making better decisions.
Absolutely.
And what I'm hearing from Suzanne is making an active choice to sit at effect or sit in the discomfort, because that's where the growth and the learning's going to come from.
So if you take the time to actually explore that and just acknowledge too that the discomfort is growth. We from a society perspective, we're so taught that failure is wrong. And I really invite people to step into that whole progress around just taking small incremental steps. And even if you, fail at them, fail forwards. Because when we actually lean more into failure, then we continue to make progress. And either way, we're going to work out what works and what doesn't. But if we're not making, progress, we're not taking action, how can we tell what's going to work for us or not?
And further to that, Suzanne, it's almost like discomfort's got a bad name.
Yeah.
But on the other side of discomfort is the growth and probably where we all want to be.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be great if we got growth just sitting around on the couch? Wouldn't it be great if things just worked out for us?
I think if you sit around on the couch too much, you can get growth, but that's not the growth you want.
If only it was the good type. Not the case, though. Now, obviously, you've worked with so many people. Can you think of some examples where you've managed to actually find someone's negative attitude and unpick it and see some growth? Have there been some really standout clients for you?
Yeah, look, there has been. I'll go more general, just more from a privacy perspective. But essentially, one of the big ones that comes up is low self-worth around having money, holding on to money. And so more often than not, it could have, related back to a childhood event or experience. It could come back from, that they grew up in a household where someone else managed the money and were constantly told, you don't need to know this. And so that comes back to those earlier emotions. But low self-worth, which is very different to confidence, like confidence is really from an angle, you can actually express confidence, but you can have low self-worth. So low self-worth will often result in sabotaging behaviour around getting rid of money and not really being consciously aware of that. So money will come in and then, it'll be gone as soon as possible. Oh, things will happen, car broke down, someone asked for a loan. And what's actually happening is that they're subconsciously getting rid of money as soon as possible. Now, it also comes into place if you're employed and not charging enough for your services. So you're overworking and underpaid, or if you're employed and not exploring opportunities to advance how you can earn more income, you keep yourself sort of at a glass ceiling because a lot of the time it's driven by, I'm not deserving of this. I see this with couples particularly, or, individuals that have gone through separations, or they've come into money where it's come by means of someone passing away, feeling like they're not worthy of that. And so what happens is they actually sabotage themselves subconsciously, and they might express this in the form of shopping addiction or other addictions that result in the depletion of that money far greater than it would have if they'd had a healthy relationship.
Further to that, Suzanne, what we've seen with some clients around inheritance and even a couple with Tats Lotto, I'll clean it up for the podcast, but they don't want to stuff it up.
Yeah.
They just have this fear, I don't want to get it wrong. They want someone standing in their corner trying to help them.
Yeah, and the Tats Lotto one is a prime example. I've seen people that have won Tats Lotto and they have, gone on to, build wealth around that. I've seen some people that have come into the wealth and they've gone into, great, I'm going to get everything I wanted. I'm going to shout all my family, and subconsciously their balance is going down super quick because it's like, I feel the need to support everyone else because it feels uncomfortable being in this position when everyone else isn't. And also when money comes into play, quite often you'll have people that will come out and say, well, I need help. But the other side of that is I've seen people where they've won Tats Lotto, and what happens is they go into shutdown. They go, I do not want this. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know anything about it. Because, again, it comes back to, do I feel worthy of it? More often than not, that's what's driving that behaviour.
So let's finish on a positive. How can we change our thinking to be more positive?
Yeah, I love this. And it comes back to what Ryan was saying before with the growth mindset. But I want to start off, first of all, with gratitude and appreciation. Now, if anyone's hearing this like, I've heard gratitude before, the reason we want to be in a place of gratitude and appreciation of what we have is, from an energetic point of view, it actually moves us into a higher state of joy and happiness. And when we're in that higher state of joy and happiness, then we're moving away from that thoughts and beliefs around scarcity, of lack, of what don't I have versus what do I have. And I see this when I work with a number of clients that are like, everyone else is traveling around the world and I'm not. Bringing it back into what can you be grateful for? So the first thing I say to clients is, when you wake up in the morning, what is 3 things that you are grateful for? Because when we can start the day off with how we plan, what's that intention for the day, we start off with gratitude and appreciation for what we have. And so we live more in a higher vibration that when we make decisions, it's coming from that joy and happiness state. The other one is one that we, alluded to before, which is, moving forwards, like focusing on progress, not perfectionism. Perfectionism is literally just procrastination dressed up. So we want to really lean into how can we be making progress and leaning into failure. And when I say failure, Sarah Blakely, who was the owner of Spanx, she has an amazing video clip on YouTube. I highly recommend you search for this. When she was sitting at the table with her brother, her dad would say, what did you fail at today? And if they didn't have anything they hadn't failed at, he'd be disappointed, because in his eyes, he actually saw that as, well, you're not trying. You're not progressing if you're not failing. And it was such a beautiful take. And that's why she's been so successful, because when she saw failure as opportunity. So if we can actually start to, flip failure as something negative and into more of a state of opportunity and growth, and where could this take me? And then the last one is, really just focusing on starting to nurture more your relationship with money, focusing on being in a growth mindset, taking on responsibility for what you can change with regard to not only your relationship with money, but what are the behaviours and habits that you have with money. Start talking about money. One of the biggest things I see with clients, usually they come to me because they don't have anyone that they can talk about money. And then as we go through the work that we do, they start talking to their friends about money, and just being able to do that. And their friends are so grateful that now they can actually talk about money, because it's been, historically such a taboo subject.
Well, I'm going to say something I'm grateful for. It was you coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. That was excellent. It was such a pleasure to have you on with Ryan and I. Make sure that you're following this podcast wherever you're listening now so you never miss an episode and you'll get lots more good advice and tips for your money. Advice given in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to influence decisions about investing or financial products. Our listeners should always seek their own professional advice that considers their own personal circumstances before making any financial decisions.